Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's lesson, CSS Pseudo-Class. And what is CSS Pseudo-Class? This is used to define a special state of an element. And so we are going to be seeing uh, what this does. And for example, it can be used to style an element when a user mouses over it. So when you mouse over or when you move your mouse over an element, you might want the element to look different. So you can use the pseudo class to do that. Another example is to style a visited and unvisited links differently. When you click a link and you go to the link, you want the link to look differently. If you haven't clicked the link, you haven't visited the site, you want the link to look differently. So we can use the pseudo class to style this differently. And thirdly, when an element gets focused, right? If you focus on an element, you want it to look differently. So these are some of the examples that you can use a pseudo class for. So what is the syntax? This is how the syntax looks like. You have the selector that you are targeting, and then you have this colon, and then you have the pseudo class, right? And then you set a property and a value, how you want the style. What kind of style do you want, and what kind of value do you want to pass to the style? So this is what we are going to be looking at in the code section. So this is the HTML that we are going to be working on, and this is also from the w3schools.com. Makes it easy for us to work with. And it just has a header saying CSS links, and it has a paragraph with an anchor and a link to default.asp, whatever that is, and it has two more paragraphs just saying something about it. So if I refresh this right now, I see CSS links. This is a link, and two notes. A hover must come after a link. A visited in the CS must come after a link and a visited in the CSS definition in order for it to be effective. And active must come after hover in the definition in order for it to be effective. So we're going to take a look at what that means. So this is the simple CSS that we are going to be looking at. But most importantly, this is the link that we are going to be looking at. Just so we work with real world URLs, I just changed this to Google, and then I just changed this to this is a link to Google, not Googly, but Google. So if I refresh this again, you can see this is a link to Google. Okay, so now all I want, and let's see how uh to style this link. So I go to my style section, and the first one that I'm gonna be doing the unvisited link, right? So if a link has not been visited, so the syntax is take the selector, in this case is gonna be the anchor, and then you have your colon, and then you can already see that it gives you some suggestions. So I'm gonna say link, and in here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna color this red. Okay. So an unvisited link, I want the color of the link should be red, right? And it's not showing red right now because I already opened Google on another tab. So that's why. But we're gonna work on that. So that's the first one that we are going to do. The second one that we are going to do is the visited link. So a link that has already been visited, right? So I'm gonna say visited link, and I'm gonna style it a and the studio will be visited, right? Okay, and I'm gonna color this brown. It looks so close to red, so I want it to be different. Let's say green. Good. Okay. So if I refresh this, you can see that it turned green right now because it's already visited, right? And I told you I already opened Google on another tab. So let's do the two more that is left. The third one, and that is going to be mouse over, right? So I'm going to use mouse over link. So anytime I push my mouse over, so it's going to be A, and then the pseudo class will be on hover. And I want the color for this should turn aqua, right? So let's try this. Let me refresh this. And when I hover over it, you see that the color of this is now aqua. Finally, let's look at selected link. I'm going to do a active, and I'm going to do color. I'm going to set this color to blue, deep blue. Okay, so I'm just going to refresh this. Good. So this is the styling that we have done. So the active must always come after the hover in the CSS class. So you can see that we put this active after the hover. And the hover must always come after the link and visited. So this is the correct way that you should do it for it to work properly. Because if you mix this up, it's gonna act differently, right? So you might wanna look at the way that you set this up. Good. So just to try this out, if I hover over it, it becomes light blue. If I click on it, and I come back, it shows green, meaning that it's been visited, and that's how come you see that, right? So it's a little complicated right now, but you can just look at uh the way it acts when you click it, when you hover over it, when you visit it, and when the link is new. You can also use this with classes, right? For example, if I set a class name for this anchor, for example, class is equal to, let's just say highlight, right? And so in this section, if I just say a dot highlight, right? And then I can now combine it with the uh, pseudo class and say hover, right? And then here I could just say color should be red. Okay, so if I refresh this and I go over it, it becomes red. So you can combine it with the class. You can also use the hover or these effects on divs, right? So let's just create a div, and I'm just gonna put in here mouse over me. Okay, and I am going to, in the style, first I want to style my div so I can see it properly. So I'm going to style this div and say background color set to that golden. Okay, color of the text, I want it to be black. Padding should be 30 pixels, text align. I want it to be centered. Okay. And then if I refresh this, you can see the div right there. Okay. So now I'm going to say div dot, oh, I say colon, and then hover, and then I can now say I want the background color should now turn to dark golden red. Okay, so when I refresh this and I go over it, it works with divs. So it basically works. Now, how do we create a tool tip from this? There's an easy way to do it, and we are going to walk through it. So in order to do this, first I am going to have a div right here. I'm going to just say div, and in here I'm going to say hover over me and see the p element. Okay, right? And I'm going to have, nope, that is not what I intended. Okay, so then I'm going to have a p element here saying here I am, right? And so maybe I don't need this there for now. So I'm just gonna comment it out, and good. Just so we can, okay. Just want to comment this out for now so we can work with our new div. Okay, so the first thing I'm gonna do is to style our p, right? So I have my p, and I'm gonna say display should be none. And if you've already taken the class, you should know what that is. And I'm gonna have a background color of yellow and a padding of 20 pixels. Okay, so if I refresh this, you only see uh, the you only see the div because the display for the p is none, so you don't see anything. Good. So the next thing I am going to do is to do the div. So I'm going to say div pseudo, and then I'm going to add the pseudo class called hover, and then space b, right? And when I do that, I can now say display. I'm going to set this to block. Good. So now anytime I hover over it, I want the display of the p should be block. So when I refresh this and I display, I just hovered around this element right here, and then you see the display now has shown. So here I am, that's the p, right? So that is how we can use it to display like a tooltip. Another thing we can do is the using the first child pseudo class. And the first child pseudo class matches a specified element that is the first child of another element. And so an example will be if we had, for example, let's just do two paragraphs, right? Let's have two paragraphs up here. So I'm gonna put here P, and I'm gonna put this is P1. This is P1 and another P here. I'm gonna say this is P2. Okay, so now in the style, I'm gonna have P, and I'm gonna use the pseudo class first child, right? So I'm saying that style the first child of any element that is a P, right? So then I can now color this red. Let's see, red. Okay, that should work. So when I refresh this, sorry, I must be hiding something. Yes, and it was this style that I put up here. So I'm just gonna, I commented it out so it doesn't affect our code. So if I refresh this again, you can see that these two P's showed, but only the first one was colored red. And the reason is because the first one was the first child of the uh was the first child, right? This P was the first P, right? That's why it is showing. This one is the second P, and so it does not show. So anytime the P is the first, that's when it shows. You can see that here I am to colored red, and the reason for that is it's also the first child of this div, right? So in this div, the first P child was here I am, right? If I put another P, just so we can validate, how are you doing? Okay, if I refresh this, we see that how are you doing did not get colored red, only because in this, the first child of this was this first P. And so every first child, which is a P, is colored red. And for the first one, these two are the first child of the body, right? Selector, right? This body element is the parent, and these are the first, this is the first child of this body element. So we can mix and match these things, right? So let's try one more thing here. If we wanted to find, if we wanted to match the first I element in all the P elements, how are we going to do that, right? If we wanted to match the first I element in all P elements, how are we going to do that? So first, I'm going to just copy or create something that we can test on. We have a couple already, but I'm going to add this right here. So I just added two more P, and in this P we have some I's in there, right? I tags, I selectors. So we want to find and match the first I elements in our P, right? One of us match the first I element in all the P elements. So this is a P element, it doesn't have an I. This is a P element, no I, but this one has an I and has another I, but we only want to match the first I element, so only this one and then ignore the second one, right? So just if I just refresh this, okay, so this third and fourth line has, this is an I, this is an I, this is an I, this is an I. We want to match only the first I of our piece, right? Of all our P's. So to do that, we can mix this. So it's gonna be P, first look for P and look for our eyes, right? And then match the first child of our eyes. So the first eye that you see in your P, right? That is what we are looking for. So with this, you can now color this and say yellow. I've used a lot of red, so yellow, right? So if I refresh this now, you can see that the first ones are colored yellow. So that's how we can mix and match. If we also wanted to say match all the I elements in all the first child of P, right? So this is a little different. This is saying that we want to match all the I's, or the I's, right? That element in all first childs, right? So all our first child P's, we want to match the I's, okay? All our first child P's, we want to match the I's, okay? So first we have to find the first child, and then we are matching the I's, okay? So the way to do that is first, we first match our first child, which is a P, so it's P colon first child. So now we find all our first child P's, but now we only want the I's. So space and then I, right? And then you can now color this, say violet. So when I refresh this, sorry, now you can see that it didn't work because the first child is this is the first child P of this element, and it doesn't have an I, so it didn't match anything. So you could see that nothing changed, right? Nothing changed because there's no I in this P. So even though it found that this is the first child, this is the first child of this is the first P tag, which is the first child, it did not see an I, right? So then it nothing happened, right? But if I move this, and I'm gonna cut this and just paste it on top here, just indent it a little bit, let it match. Okay, if I refresh this now, you can see that the first child was this. So it found it, all right, and then it matched the eyes, right? So I think that color all the eyes in your first child with a pink, and that's why you have pink as the style, right? So that is how we do this. So you can mix and match as much as you want. You just have to know how to do it, how to read it, and how to use it. So thank you guys, and see you in the next lesson.